This is Ariel over at Nyth. It's a beautiful snowy day. There's a few lazy flakes drifting down out there, and it's chilly. We have had unusually little snow for the year so far, but it's the day before Thanksgiving, and I wanted to talk to you about what my thoughts are on tiny houses now that I have lived in one for 2 full years. This is the day I moved into my house 2 years ago, so this is my house and I's anniversary. To give you a little background, if you don't know the story on my house, I bought a tiny house 2 years ago. My main reason for doing so was that I live in a very expensive area. The housing in general, and especially anything affordable, is in extremely short supply. I had been renting a place for quite a while with a roommate, and we lost that house due to it being sold. And I was looking at either leaving the area, starting up a whole new life somewhere else, or paying rent that was in excess of 100% of my income. That obviously wasn't going to work, so I was looking at what my options were. I didn't really want to leave, and so I was looking at alternative ways of staying in this location. One of the first things I came up with is I could live in a van. I have lived in my vehicle for fairly extended periods of time, various times, and I thought I could just do this long term. So I started looking at camper van blogs and van conversions and so on, and I bumped back into the idea of a tiny house. I had seen one several years before when somebody on Facebook shared a video, and I thought, oh, isn't that cute, and never thought about it again. So when I was now looking at something for full-time living, I bumped back into the idea and thought, in my climate, that is a much more comfortable option compared to a van, to actually have a house with insulation and something to be warm and comfortable. It gets cold here. We have long winters, lots of snow. So I kind of decided pretty quickly I think that's what I wanted to do. So my main motivation was just that I live in an area I like. This area is very expensive, and I wanted to be able to stay here, and I didn't know how else I could afford to. 2 years in, that has very little to do with what I love about the fact that I did buy a tiny house. The benefits for me have been multiple. In those 2 years, there were a few challenges. Some people asked me about the challenges and what did I learn and what was the hardest, and that's hard for me to answer because they're usually asking about what was the hardest in relation to going tiny as far as the lack of space. That was not hard for me. I realize I'm probably the exception here, but I have always been comfortable living in pretty small spaces. Like I said, I've lived out my vehicle before. I like to backpack. I can share a 32 square cubic feet volume tent with a second person. I can live with 27 pounds in my backpack for weeks on end. The small space thing was just not challenging for me. I realize it is for most people, but if you need help with that, you're going to have to find somebody else to assist you with how to downsize stuff and so on, because that just wasn't an issue for me. The challenges for me were mostly related to going off-grid. I moved in right at the start of the winter. Like I said, it's snowing out there right now, and it was that we had more snow on the ground 2 years ago when I moved in. And I don't recommend, if you're going to learn about living off-grid, to start right at the start of a northern Wyoming mountain winter, but that is what I did. And it worked. There were some challenges and a pretty big learning curve, and there were a few days where I wasn't sure what I'd got myself into. It was very helpful to have a good friend and neighbor who has skills in areas I don't, who helped me out with that learning curve. But 2 years in, I would say that's not challenging anymore at all either. It actually quit being challenging kind of a while ago. So there wasn't anything super hard for me about going tiny. And I realize most people aren't going to go off-grid when they go tiny, so those things may very well not even be an issue for you. What I do see a benefit is, for one, just my mental and emotional health. I've had several things that were pretty difficult for me in the last couple of years, unhouse related, and the house certainly does not fix those things, but it has benefited me in a few ways. I've had the space and privacy. I had a great roommate before, but there are days when it's just really nice to have your own place. I've had the financial freedom, which I'll talk about in a bit, but I have been less stressed about finances, which is helpful when you're stressed about other things to at least not have that stress as well. And I'm much freer, which I'll also talk about more. So those benefits all have very little to do with my initial reasoning for why I went tiny. But they are, I think, the main benefits now. And none of these things, disappointingly enough, are really related to the tiny house or how cute it is. And I love my house. I think my house is beautiful. But the main benefits for me are not really related to that, though it would be difficult for me to live in a place that I thought was really ugly long term. I don't own the ground where I'm parked. I trade some work to the landowners here for rent. I don't know how long I'll be able to stay here, but I'm here for now and hopefully can stay for a while. If you've seen my other photos on my blog and so on, you know that I live in a little clearing in the woods. I have a big garden. I have, over those 2 years, either realized or become more aware of how much I like this kind of lifestyle. How much I like just living in a very basic way. I like splitting my own firewood to have heat. I don't love carrying water, but I don't hate it. I do love gardening. I love cooking. I do have room enough in my house for the things that are important to me. Some people say it looks way too cluttered, which is fine, but I kept almost all of my kitchen things. I have a large kitchen for a tiny house. I love to cook. I know you can give me an explanation on how to do a one-pot meal. I do know how to do that. I do it when I'm backpacking, when I only want to carry 20-ish pounds on my back. I love to cook. When I'm home, I want to do 4 or 5-pot meals and put things in the oven and do other things. So that's just something that's important to me. So I was able to keep most of the things in my life without any downsizing trouble that were important to me. The things I got rid of when I moved were mostly large furniture items, big couches, big bed frames, some big house plants. I had a fern that was about the size of this couch, which was beautiful and was clearly not going to fit in this house. Now I have little house plants. If they get too big, they get trimmed so they stay little. But it did not, for me personally, really involve getting rid of any stuff that was very important to me. Again, I realize that's probably the exception. But it has given me more time to do the stuff that is important to me. I enjoy gardening. I enjoy photography. I enjoy cooking. I enjoy not waking up to an alarm clock, which I still do plenty of days. I work at a restaurant. I work morning shifts, and I certainly need an alarm clock to get there on time. But there are more days where I don't have to at this point in my life. I got a 15-year loan to buy this house. Some people ask me what my career path has been that has allowed me to get to this place in life. I haven't had one. I have spent my life doing a lot of jobs I really liked and a wide variety of things. I have milked cows. I have worked on a produce farm. I have done flower arranging. I have worked at a residential boys' school. I've done wilderness therapy. I've worked in daycare. And now I wait tables, which is by far the best paying job and by far my least favorite job. Before I did things I really liked, and they were not very high paying occupations. But I made enough to live on. That was fine with me. I loved what I did. One of the big benefits, for sure, has been financial in going tiny. I have a 15-year loan. 2 years in, I have about 2/3 paid off. If things continue with no major hiccups, I should have it fully paid off in another year. My lack of debt was probably my major career choice that has allowed that. When I decided to go tiny, I had no debt of any kind. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have credit cards. I didn't have school loans. So that made it possible. Now I've realized over these couple years, as I look at that in another year, I'm not going to have a mortgage payment. I'm not going to have a rent payment. I do grow a lot of my own food, not everything, because I live in a very cold place and there's lots of things that don't grow. But my actual set monthly bills are going to be very minimal. And as far as my hobbies and free time, they're things that for the most part aren't crazy expensive. Some of them cost something like photography, but I have most of that equipment, so now it's a free hobby. Backpacking gear can be expensive. I already own it, so now it's a free hobby. So my expenses are going to be very, very limited, which has made a brand new thought pop into my mind that had nothing to do with why I went tiny, that I'm going to be able to retire. And by retire, I don't mean sit on a beach or golf the rest of my life, but I mean stop doing jobs that are not particularly things I want to do, on schedules or for whom people I do not particularly care to work for or be on that schedule. And that's really exciting to me. I don't know for sure what I'll do. My little dream in my head right now goes something like, I'd like to buy my own chunk of ground. Realistically, that is not going to happen right in this area because this is a place where the median home price is somewhere over $500,000. I will realistically never buy any little crumb of ground in this spot. But I'd like to stay somewhere in the Mountain West. I'd like to go somewhere less expensive where I could buy a sizable acreage. I would be able to move my tiny house in the next day and set up living there. At some point that might involve building a small house, larger than this but smaller than average house, on the ground that I own. And just kind of being able to do these things that I enjoy so much full time. Like being self-sufficient, creating my own heat by cutting firewood, creating my own food by raising animals and gardening, preserving food, all of that. Those are just things I really enjoy, and that is fun for me when I get up and do that. I apologize for my voice. I'm getting over a cold and I feel much better and my voice still sounds weird. So financially it's been really freeing, and I think if you are brand new to the idea of tiny houses, from the questions I've done quite a few interviews with different researchers and reporters. I think that most commonly people want to know things about the small space and how that works, and is it stressful and is it claustrophobic? No, it's not at all for me. It may be for you. It probably would be more so for more people. But for me, it's very, very simple. And it's plenty of space. It's just me. I'm not entirely sure I could raise several children in here, though I know there are people who do that and they seem very happy. But for me, the tiny house really has nothing to do with the tiny house. It has to do with all those other areas where it has freed me up. I've been able to, like I said, work less, and I'm still, as I said, paying my house off at a pretty good rate. I've had the freedom to do other things I enjoy already, like spend more time gardening and out taking photos of the gorgeous wildlife in this area. And those are things that are just really important to me. Everyone's dream is different. You might hate all of those things. That's fine. But I guess my main thought as we're 2 years into tiny house life is that if I was going to tell you one thing to think about, especially as we head into this holiday season that's mostly about getting stuff, what actually do you want to do? What do you enjoy? I don't think it's always a good idea to just pursue your dream job, because some dream jobs don't actually pay any money. So if you want to pursue dream jobs, like for me, my dream job would be taking photos when I want and gardening and cooking my own food. Now that is realistically not going to pay me anything. So if I want to make that possible, I'm going to have to make other choices to do that, like spend a few more years working to be able to buy something in cash so I have no payments and can have very, very low monthly bills, so that I am then free to do the things I want. Like I said, everyone's dreams are different. That's probably not your dream. But I think too many of us go through life with kind of a set schedule where you go to school, you get a job, you start your career, and so on and so on. And sometime when you're old, then you can stop doing all these things and do what you want. I'd like to do what I want now. I don't want to wait till I'm old. And if the things you want to do require more cash than the things that I'm interested in, you'll have to be aware of that and figure out how to make that possible. But just stop and think out what you actually like, what makes you happy, what do you enjoy doing, and then what do you have to do to make that possible? Is there a job you can do that would actually pay for living expenses, maybe if you lived a little more simply, that you would like? Is there a job you could do less of that would pay you enough money, even if you don't love the job, to give you free time to do the other things that you like that don't make any money if you had less space? Do you, not that a tiny house is for everyone, it's certainly not, but do you actually want that big house or that new whatever that somebody's going to get you for Christmas? Is that really going to make you happy, or is it going to be one more thing you have to take care of and maintain and repair and fix and worry about if someone scratches or if it breaks or all of those things? You know, and maybe you do like those things, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. Just too many people don't stop and think out if they do want that, or if that's just what they've been told everyone does, and so they think they do. So that's what I would encourage you. 2 years into tiny house life, who cares about the house? But living here and having bought one has been the best financial decision of my life, for sure, so far, and has already given me a lot more freedom on many, many levels, and is about to give me even more freedom, and that's really exciting to me. And it's so much fun that even though my version of freedom and what I want to do probably looks very, very different from yours, I just want to encourage you all to think about what is your dreams and what do you want to do and what would you have to do to make that possible, which very likely is not buy a tiny house. It might be, it might not be, but what else do you have to do? What could you do differently? What could you save differently? What could you not buy or not have or get rid of, you know, to free yourself up mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, to do the things that are important to you, whatever those things are. So 2 years into tiny house life, I love living here. It's one of the best things I've ever decided to do. At times it's been a little scary and overwhelming, especially right at first. I love it, even with all the ups and downs in my life. I really love being here. And I just would encourage you all to pursue what's actually important to you, and at least take the time to stop and figure out what that is and what you would have to do to make those things actually possible. Because that's the main benefit of a tiny house. I don't know if I'll always live in one. Maybe I'll live in a small house someday. Maybe I'll wake up tomorrow morning and want a 15,000 square foot house, and I will live here while I save up the money for that. That seems highly unlikely. But my point is, just think out what you do want. And then if you have the flexibility and freedom, you can do whatever it is. Even if what you want is a monster house, not a tiny house. You know, there's a trade-off of I don't have to work the rest of my life paying interest and being in debt and being enslaved to the whole system of this is what everyone does. That's just really, really exciting to me. So, my main point of tiny houses is they can give you an awful lot of freedom in many areas, and even if you don't have a tiny house, I think you can pursue having freedom in all or many of those areas by taking the time to think about what is actually important to you and what you would need to do to make that all possible. So I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I am thankful for my tiny house. If you got any questions, feel free to ask them, like my videos, and I will try to keep doing more. You all have a wonderful holiday.